This week's episode is something different. An interview of lifelong professional horseman Terry Helder on the eve of his retirement. Terry and Peg Helder spent 40 years traveling through the ever-changing world of horses. This was an opportunity to back trail through the many twists and turns of a successful yet challenging career. But even more than the story of a career, I hope our conversation also shows the value each of us put on a half-century of close friendship. What I didn't know was that this visit would also be a farewell. Just weeks after our conversation, we lost Terry. So instead of a retrospective, this interview becomes a eulogy, a celebration of a life well lived. Travel safely, old friend. Hello folks, we're here for something different and I think special. We are with my friend Terry Helder. He and his wife Peg, who is resolutely staying off camera, have run Evergreen Farm, where we're located now, since 1986. Before that, they worked at a couple of other places, and they've settled here for the past 38 years. This is a historic period because about 60 days from now, they're going to close their training and breeding operation and move into a much-deserved retirement. So, in advance of that, I thought we'd all sit down and have a conversation, and Terry was nominated to be the spokesman. So, Terry, welcome to your house.
Thanks, Herm, and thank you for having me on Lifetime with Horses.
So, I know we went back and forth about what we wanted to talk about, and we realized every time we'd talk for 2 hours.
Yes.
And we're not going to do a 2-hour interview,
Right.
because we would be interested in it, but it might just be the two of us at the end of the game. So, what I've found is if you want to find out about your friends, go to their website, because that's where they put their best foot forward. And interestingly enough, in the Evergreen Farm website is a mission statement that pretty much sums up Terry and Peg's career. And I'm going to read that, and then we're going to use that as a jumping off place and explore how Terry and Peg have gone forward to achieve the goal that's stated in the mission statement. So the words, which are very much to the point and lay out where that enterprise was going in the beginning, and frankly where it's wound up, is as follows. Our mission is to produce great-minded, versatile horses for all levels of riders. So there's several different pieces there, but they all have to come together for the whole concept to work, and we're going to talk about how they did and how they achieved that. But before we get there, let's talk about where things started, because when we talk about versatile horses, it implies somebody who has done a little bit of everything. And I can remember horse shows back in the 70s and 80s when every time the gate opened, one or the other or both of us and Peg would be riding in, regardless of what was going on in there. Tell us a little bit about how you got started, humble beginnings, I know, as all of us did, and how you got involved in showing horses that did so many different things.
Well, I think it started way at the beginning, and actually you were there the first day I met Peg. She moved up here from Texas, and of course I heard about it. I hadn't even met her yet. I heard this girl came up from Texas, and she's going to be at some horse shows. So, of course, I was 19 years old, and I started trying to figure out what show she may go to. So anyhow, I went there, and that's where actually I met her. And I know you were judging that day.
I was.
And
I was watching things transpire outside the ring as well.
Yeah, so anyhow, I met her there. And from there on, there's a lot of stories from there to now too, but we'll just go from there on. We did meet, we dated, and we both showed. And we would show every weekend, almost every weekend. We each had a horse at Annapolis. She had a gelding by the name of Ernest Buck, and we would go and we would show in every class. We didn't really know what we were doing in all of them, but we went in every class. And Now, Peg had some formal training in Texas, some lessons, and had her horse at a trainer. I basically was a self-taught trainer. So we got married in 1974, and in 1975 we started showing Appaloosas, and we got. I don't know, somebody just took us under their wing, and the Schatzbergers, and I mean, it always let me know, you don't ever forget where you came from, because in this industry, it's a tough industry, but as long as you remember where you came from, you can go a long way, because there's a lot of people that will help you. And I would say we were probably very lucky. There were a lot of things that were put in front of us. Our daughter even told us that the other week. She says, Dad, you always were lucky enough to take the things that were put in front of you and go with them, and that were offered to you. And we showed horses for them for almost 11 years.
But even before that, Terry, I'm going to interrupt you, because by the time you met Peg, you had moved up in the world. You had a truck and a trailer.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Now, at the early shows, I can remember judging a show back in the woods at Our Gang Riding Club. You show up at the horse show, but there's no truck or no trailer.
No, I would
there.
ride to the horse show. The very first horse show I ever showed at myself was 1968. I rode to the horse show. The showgrounds was, I don't know, maybe 2.5, 3 mile away. And I'd ride there, get up early in the morning, and go there. And I really got to enjoy showing, but I wasn't old enough to drive at that time. So when I turned 16, my dad had a pickup truck, and he had racks, and we lived on a farm, so he hauled other animals on it also. And
So it was basically stock racks on a pickup
That's exactly right. That's
And
exactly what it was.
Was that particular conveyance blessed with a ramp?
No, we had to find a place. I did have one horse that would just jump up on, but most of the time we'd have to find, depending on what horse we took, back up to a bank, unload him, and show him. But I remember going across the Columbia Wrightsville Bridge, going to a John Glick show in Leola, and the horses had their heads hanging out over, and we were headed to Leola and show all day. And
as I recall, John Glick's showgrounds was remarkably free of anything that looked like a bank.
that's exactly right.
So you were probably having a little bit of a challenge once you got there.
Yeah, we sort of, I'm not even sure we were on the show. I think we had to go off the showgrounds and find a bank or one of his fields somewhere up against a fence row or something. But yeah, we got him unloaded, and we got him shown. And
So
went
we
back up.
started a little more humbly than a lot of
Oh,
people
right.
do. And if you remember, I was driving a 5-horse stock truck with a wooden body.
Yes.
And
yep.
it was so primitive, it was like you had your own log cabin on wheels.
That's exactly right. And it didn't matter. There were all kind of combinations of things that came to the horse shows.
Well, everything from refrigerator trucks
That's exactly.
to,
If they could,
converted horses.
if they could run them in a van or whatever, they'd bring them. And of course, then we went through that phase. I was like probably, well, I'd have been 16, 17. I was driving, and then till I met Peg, and then she comes up here from Texas, has a trailer, and it's like, wow, this is like going in style. And we would take her trailer, and we would go to the shows. And back at that time, there was a show almost every weekend in Lancaster, York County, Lebanon.
Mostly non-breed shows.
Oh, yeah, these were all-
unaffiliated, but some big shows.
Yeah, big shows. And H&H Tack Shop from Annville used to put out a green flyer.
Everybody had one.
And everybody, that was the Bible to go on to horse shows that evening.
On every show for the year, and if you didn't get in that, nobody'd find you.
That's exactly right. And but I remember one time we went, it was a rainy morning, and Peg says, "You think they're going to be rained out?" And I said, "We'll drive around till we find one that isn't." And that's what we did. But we showed. That's all we wanted to do.
All outdoors, of course.
Absolutely. I don't think I ever remember. There used to be a place down in Maryland. We'd go in the winter. They'd have a winter series.
Columbia Horse Center.
No, this was Spring.
High Point Horse Center.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, that was it. But they would have like a series, and we would actually load up in the winter and go. I mean, showing was what we were going to do. That was it.
And a lot of times the ring was grass.
Yes, oh yeah,
And
outside.
if you were running barrels, which Peg did,
Yep.
it was like death-defying act. It was more a matter of whether your horse would stay balanced and survive than how fast he was over the ground.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it was a whole different kind of showing, and it wasn't like today. I mean, your horse, he
had to have survival skills.
Had to have survival skills. I mean, And that's what we used. And we used them, and oddly enough, these things stayed sound and sane, but they were fun times, way fun times, and you look back on that sort of thing, and it's sort of neat. And then from there, we got married, and then we decided we wanted to do breed shows.
And the Appaloosas were huge at that
At that time, the Appaloosa was very, very popular. If you were not into the quarter horses, and the next breed that would have been next would have been the Appaloosas, and we bought a gelding, and he was not a really talented horse, but he was just a good, kind horse, and it was what we could afford at the time, and we loaded up and went to some Appaloosa shows. There were quite a few of them, not that far from us, and Brandy's Buster was the horse's name. I'll never forget that. But and we got there, and somehow we met the people, Gary and Sandy Schatzberger, who had some very, very nice,
ahead of their time,
way ahead of their time. I mean, and I don't even know at that time. I didn't obviously know as much about horses. Didn't really know that much at all. But I knew that these were nice horses, and we got to meet them. And as you usually tried to do when anybody had nice horses, you always tried to find out who they were. And somehow we got together, and we ended up showing horses for them. They
for quite a while.
Yeah, for 11 years we basically showed horses for them. And now we didn't get paid. They paid us like they owned a John Deere business, and they sold King trailers. And they may send us a ride mower home, or a used ride mower, and say, here, you can have this ride mower for showing this.
You were working another job at that time.
Oh, absolutely. We were doing this part-time. Now, we would come home on the weekends and go to the horse show. So we went from there and still showed Appaloosas on up until 1986.
And you showed these things in everything, right?
Well, when we showed for the Schatzbergers, we started out showing halter horses. Okay, that's where we started. We learned, what I did learn in showing halter horses, and Sandy she was the best I ever knew at it. She could pick a baby, and she could tell you what the thing was going to look like when it was 3 years old. And she was very, very good at it. And I don't know if I learned it or not.
She could look at a 3-month-old.
Exactly. She could look at a 3-week-old and say, this is a miniature of what this horse will be. And I somehow learned it. I mean, I don't know if I learned it, I trained my eye or whatever. And I got pretty good at it when we started the Breed Pay Me hobby. I thought, wow, I mean, this is, it is work. I mean, I see what she saw. And anyhow, it really did play over for the rest of my life and into my career. And then we went to start riding the horses. They raised their own. They raised a lot. They owned a horse by the name of Doubt Brighter.
And these were halter horses, but they really rode.
They were gorgeous horses. I mean, and they were all way ahead of their time. I mean, that horse today, a lot of those horses today would still good place in like the performance halter today at the breed shows. So we were very fortunate to be able to have that. And then what happened is we did a lot of winning. Obviously, had good horses. And we would get horses to show by other people, bring us up, pay us to lead them into pen. And I mean, there were times, most of the time, Peg would have, and I would have like 12 to 15 head of halter horses to show in the morning. And then we started riding these horses, and we had to get more educated, and we sort of self-educated. We got to ride with some people, talk to a lot of people, and went on. But yes, we rode them in everything we could. I mean, and that's where it started. And I think it's because we just wanted to show. I don't know that we were doing it for any purpose at that time, other than we just wanted to ride and we wanted to show.
The way to be in the game.
Exactly. We just wanted to be in the game. We wanted, just to be out there showing these horses, and one thing leads to another, and we ended up here at Evergreen in 1986.
And do you think that coming up the way you did, and wanting to be in the game as much as you folks did, do you think it builds that hunger that carries you through the rest of your career?
Oh, I think you have to have the hunger.
Yeah.
Any young person that wants to get into, if you're not going into this thinking you're going to eat, sleep, drink horses for the rest of your life, you're probably not going to get very successful or succeed. I mean, even when Peg and I met, it's what we do, and I think we knew then, didn't really outwardly say it, but I think we knew then that probably our our ending was going to be do this for a living.
Yeah.
Do this for a living.
And then that opportunity came up in 1986. You had worked for a short time with a private individual.
Yes, I did.
But when that ended, you came really just down the road and had the opportunity to buy this facility. And you were then, what, maybe 28?
31. I was 31.
Peg.
Peg would have been 29. She wouldn't have been 30 yet, but I was 31 when we moved here.
Yep.
And
you started standing an Appaloosa stallion named King Goer, right?
that's correct. That horse came over. What happened is Sandy Schatzberger got very, very sick. She was dying. She sent the horse here, said, sell him, and we sold all the, and we did have some horses in partner, and we brought them all here to sell them to, so that they were, when, she did pass away, so that part of her estate was settled, but, and we got out, obviously the partnership.
But part of the arrangement ended up being that you kept the King Goer horse.
We did keep him, yes.
And he was by a horse named Goer, who was basically a Go Man Go bred stallion.
That's correct.
Right?
That's correct.
And that sort of starts a theme that carries through your whole career, and that is the need for speed.
Correct.
Even though he was Goer and King Goer were primarily thought of as halter horses and halter horse sires, they basically got their looks from the function that came along with the speed horse.
Yes, and even to go back to the horse Schatzberger had the Dalbrighter horse, he was a Jaguar bred horse. I mean,
Yeah.
he was so much running horse, and that's where I learned that it took running horse to make good horses. I mean, I think we had to do that, and I had to have it. It was me that had to have it, because I think that basically need for speed, and when we started riding and training other horses, I think it followed through to the point where we knew we needed this to work in any kind of program.
And we're going to touch on that
Sure.
again and again. But regardless of where things took you, your horses always had a pretty good dose of running blood in them.
Yeah.
And I'll confess that it's one of the ways our trajectories crossed. I've always had horses that had some run. And I'd show reiners that were heavy, bottom side would be heavy into the running blood. People thought I was nuts.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a different kind of athleticism. And it builds a fundamentally correct horse because they have an objective measure, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And so you got this King Goer horse, and I remember what you said to me at that time. You said, they say the Goers won't ride, but this one's gonna ride. And you rode him, and you rode his babies, right?
We did ride his baby.
But it wasn't always fun.
No, they did ride, and you could get through to them, but it wasn't that particular bloodline.
They were talented.
Yes, they could be very talented. They were not the easiest to train. And
They were huge movers, and as I recall, he wound up making a mark in the sort of Western dressage sport horse world.
Well, yeah, and actually, when we sold him for the Schatzbergers, the new owners had gotten him. They took him to the World Show, and he did win suitability for dressage. He's a world champion suitability for dressage. He had a lot of move to him. I mean, he was a nice horse, and he was a good horse, but they were a little more stronger headed than
You didn't have that mind.
Exactly.
that
The
you wanted to
mindset was just not what we were really going to want to look for at that time.
And that all changed in what, about 1987? Would that be when you first met Paint Me Hobby?
Well, Paint Me Hobby was met the week we moved here in 1986. We went down to Loudon.
He was a 1985 foal.
He was an 85
'Cause
foal.
I bought one out of the same pasture.
Right. And that's what we were told, that there was and what you have to understand, at that point, we moved out of the Appaloosas and did not go to the quarter horse breed, but went to the paint.
Which was on the horizon and
Absolutely.
growing fast.
Yes,
right?
it was very new here. There were not a lot of paint stallions around. There was not a lot of paint. I think there was one maybe breeding program. A guy had a breeding program here in Redline by the name of Glenn Dietz, and I think that's the only. And Maynard Long and Carlisle. Those were the two big breeders around here. There were a couple in New Jersey, but so someone told me that in Loudon Valley there's a crop out.
And that's a different concept for folks that didn't grow up with the AQHA excessive white rule that wouldn't let you register a quarter horse with more white than like up to the knees and any unconnected white on their body and more than a certain amount on the face. And Paint Me Hobby had several of those things going.
Right. Yeah, and at that time, like you're saying, it was sort of taboo if you had those, and it was sort of taboo if people knew your stallion was producing those kind of horses. That was back right at the time we were buying him, and a lot of people did not advertise those horses would go through sales with no papers. But I was told about this horse.
And then it was a nice horse.
It was a very nice horse. We went to see him. There were several people there to see him before, and he was in the rough. And like you said, I mean, if you bought him out of the same pen, there was like 17 or 18 colts in there. And I went in, and who became a very good friend of mine and bought him from Mr. Pete Bull. But we loaded him on trailers yearling. He was rough as you could be. I mean, his tail was chewed off above his hocks, and he needed trimmed. But that's where we bought him. And we didn't really buy him for a breeding horse when we bought him. We bought him because we were getting into the paint business. We thought, well...
You knew he'd ride.
Yeah, we figured he would ride. We knew the Hobby Doc horse. And
he would fly Hobby Doc. And out of a mare named Miss Three Rockets, who was a rocket bar bred mare.
That's correct.
So we're back to speed, right?
Well, he was bred exactly. I wanted to see his mother, his dam, before I bought him. We went to see her, and I looked over the fence at her, and I turned around and I said, let's go load the colt, because she was just gorgeous mare. And yes, and of course, Rocket Bar was by Rocket Wrangler, who was a sire dash for cash. So, I mean, there was so much pedigree in those horse top and bottom. We got home, we started to look at it, and everybody told us how nice the horse was. And so we decided, maybe we're sitting in a position where maybe standing a paint stallion wouldn't be a bad idea for us. And so then that's basically what we did.
So
and then we
when did you start to feel like you really had something special with this horse? Because I saw him and I thought, I actually looked at him, and I was like everybody else. Well, I wanted to be able to go to the quarter horse shows, so I passed.
Right.
And thank goodness I did.
Yes.
Because he'd have been one hell of a gelding if I'd bought him. And
Glad
it would
you
have been
did
what a
too.
waste. What a waste. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it would have been a waste, because our first inkling was we were going to bring him home, geld him, ride him at the shows, get our name called out, so then we would be in it, because nobody in the paint business really knew who we were. So anyhow, but when I knew he was special, and I tell this story a lot, he was a 2-year-old, and we were breaking him, and he didn't ride anything like these Appaloosas, and I'm like, I mean, as a matter of fact, we used to get a lot of problem horses in when we first came here, and we went at him a little differently, and he quickly told us, okay, we're not going to go at him like this. This horse doesn't have a problem. Why are we going at him?
Don't give him a problem.
Yeah, don't make it a problem. Why are we going at him like this? So we got him broke, and we had some help. Some people come over, we'd watch him, and at that time we were still eager to learn. We wanted to know more about training horses, and probably he's the horse, I'd have to say. He's the horse that made us horse trainers. And
you showed him in all sorts of things.
Oh, yes, we did. But I remember taking him to the first show, it was open show, just try him out. We went there, and this horse was so good. I mean, we didn't ride him very much. Never picked his head, never did anything. Did absolutely everything he knew at home. We couldn't ask him to do more. And I remember Peg saying, are you sure he's okay? Should we take his temperature? We were just not used to this kind of minds and horses that wanted
Thought he might be ill.
Yeah, we said maybe he's sick, But anyhow, yeah, then we brought him home, and we did show him. We showed him, we promoted him. And at that time, if you had an APH, you had to have like an APHA champion or an AQHA for people to really come in the area to look and breed to your horse.
So he got his halter points, he had Western Pleasure points, he had barrel racing points.
Hunter under saddle,
Hunter
reining.
under saddle, yeah.
We did everything. He won the versatility at the Ohio Paint Horse Classic, which was sort of a highlight of his deal, because
And that was multiple events.
That was-
Same horse, never leave the ring.
never leave the ring. You change saddles in the ring, and it used to be a big deal to have a versatility horse. He was at one time he was the leading versatility sire for APHA. That was later, obviously, and all his colts were versatile. And of course we showed him that way. That's what we were used to doing. And he did also win the Challenge of the Breeds,
Which was a breed promotional, and a horse promotional event at the Farm Show building in Harrisburg.
That's correct. It was held during the Keystone International Livestock Expo, and he was the first competitor of that in the first year they had it. And he did win that there, which was...
And how many different events?
7. I think it was 7 different events.
Yeah.
I think he did the Western Pleasure, the Hunter under saddle, Hunter hack, pleasure driving,
Yeah, barrel racing.
Barrel racing and Western, right? Yeah, barrel racing. It might have been 6 classes. I think it was 6. It would have been 6.
And it was multiple breeds. There was
Absolutely.
quarter horses, there was Appaloosas, there was paints.
Yeah, there would have been 2 from each breed,
Right.
and then they competed as
And he
as
won
the
it.
best one. Yes, he did.
And didn't he win it more than once?
He had a daughter win it. He had a daughter that was reserve champion in it. We had 2 of his daughters back later to show it. So yeah, he represented it well.
And that
while
was
it going.
back to your mission statement. Part of the versatile part of that
Exactly,
statement was
exactly.
you were getting there, and you didn't have to do the heavy lifting you had to do with the Appaloosa stallion it had.
Absolutely.
You felt like you were on vacation.
We were. It really, honestly, this horse made our job so easy. I always said I worked for him. You know.
Well, he was a good boss.
Yeah, he was a really good boss. So, yeah, those colts that came on. I mean, he had 303 babies, and we probably trained. I'm going to say we probably trained close to 80% of those.
Well, and as things progressed, you eventually made the decision to only ride horses that were your own bloodline.
That's correct. That's correct.
And we'll talk more about that later. But I wanted to just, I'm going to feed this to you because I tell you personally, this is when I decided that your horse, Paint Me Hobby, was something special as a sire. So you live down here out in the country, and not far away is a little town of Crayley.
That's correct.
And they have what they call Crayley Days, which is kind of a carnival.
Yep.
And they had, fireworks, and they had a petting zoo, and they had Ferris wheels, and all of this stuff come in. And they were supposed to have pony rides, but the pony ride guy didn't come.
Right.
So they called you.
Yes.
And you got the brilliant idea to take your 2-year-olds.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit more about that, because that sounds like, at best, a lawsuit waiting to happen, at worst, a mass murder. But
Yeah.
it didn't work out that way.
Take note I didn't call you first because you would have talked me out of it. But anyhow, yeah, they called us and I said, well, we probably go help the community, So we just looked around. What do we have standing around here? I think we may have even taken him as one of the horses and said, well, let's just load these 2-year-olds up. I mean, we've been riding these
And
things.
you had a
they're
stack
quiet.
of them. You took
Yeah, well,
over.
we used to have the stack of them running around and we took the ones that we knew already rode, and they were quiet. The owners were riding them around. Well, they ought to be all right, And of course, we get there, and I think that was the time the air balloon was taking off, giving rides.
So some big hot air balloon.
Yeah, and if you ever heard them things take off, the noise that they make, and pretty broke till we were done. We didn't lose any kids, but no, they were all really good. And I mean,
And none of the horses got a hot air balloon ride.
nope, not a one of them. It was all good, but I mean it. And then the problem was that you started to take that kind of stuff for granted. And I think I did over the years. Those horses were so good
They were
minded
bold.
and very and they just whatever. If you ask them something, they'll just say, "Okay, I'll do it for you."
That just amazed me, because
They were.
I often tended to work with a different type or class of horse that would have had homicidal intentions if we had taken some of them down there.
I had some of those at the place too already, yeah, and we did, and I guess we did some crazy things with 2-year-olds. We didn't think about 2-year-olds when it was time to promote him, and we started showing them as 2-year-olds and just and we didn't break them down.
They weren't really trained. You just took them in.
Right, we didn't break them down because we never had to ride them that hard to get out of them what they had to go do at the horse show at that time to win something, and yeah, they were a lot of fun. He was a great horse, and we were, again, very fortunate that a horse fell in our laps. And and I do want to go back just a little bit because nobody's going to believe this with the price of horses today. When I priced this horse from Pete Boland, of course,
Paint Me Hobby
yeah,
himself.
this is Paint Me Hobby himself. And of course, he has excessive light. He has no value at a quarter horse ranch. He has no value at all. The only value he has really is if you can get him to somebody that's starting in this paint thing that's coming to the east and is starting to build pretty good.
And you had to hope he fit their requirements.
That's
'cause
exactly
he didn't
right.
have paint papers.
We'd have no papers
So
on him.
you basically had to hope you would get them.
That's right. We knew we couldn't get quarter horse papers. That he was sold to us that way. And I bought the horse for $1,500 and didn't have to pay for him until we got the paint papers on him. So I would take 100 of him right now, and for the
Especially
same
for
price.
$1,500
For the same
around.
price, I'll take 100 of them right now. But yeah, that's what we paid for him. I mean, a lot of people ask, a lot of people want to know, and always thought he was this high dollar stallion, and I paid $1,500 for him in Virginia. And he was a high dollar stallion, but not what I paid for him. He ended up being a high dollar stallion, and that he did himself, really.
So let's just talk about what you see as the components of a versatile horse, because everybody can, the horse can do anything. Fine, but what does it take for the horse to be that horse that can do a lot of different things? Where do you start? What's the first thing you'd look for before you'd consider a horse to be either one to show or as a breeding horse to produce that type of horse?
Well, I think the first thing you have to look at, which I think it took me quite a few years to understand that. I think because we were into the halter horse business, or not into business, but showing halter horses and having success, and all we needed to look at there was conformation and get them to stand up. I think in a versatile horse, if you're looking for horses to go in and do a lot of different jobs for you, which means the horse is going to take a lot of training and he's going to take a lot of time on his back. I think it takes a good mind. I think later in life, even though I was fortunate enough to have Paint Me Hobby, who, his baby's a lot of very, very pretty horses. But it wasn't the pretty that made them good. It was the mind that was in that pretty head.
But you always rode a pretty one.
Yes, but I was lucky enough to be able to do that.
So that's just the cherry on top.
Yes, exactly. To me, it is. I mean, at one time they had to be pretty first, and then we'll look at everything else. But I think I later learned that the mind absolutely is the first thing you have to look at. Then I will go look at the horse. I mean, is he conformated? Is he, formed to function, basically?
I'm assuming, and given your record, this must have been important to you. Soundness.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I'm going to go there. I mean, I think when you go to the conformation, you're going to go to the soundness issue, and the other side to that is if you have the mind and you have the conformation and it's correct conformation, you're probably going to keep them sound. Most horses break down because we have to put too much time on them to get the little thing out of them we want. Here when you're teaching them one thing, you may be teaching them five that are going to end up going to be five different things that they're going to do. And these horses took that so well. And it takes a special horses to do that. Not every horse can do it.
And you need a dash of athleticism too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and you got to have them wanting to do stuff. And the best thing about breeding versatile horses to me was versus today with the specialty thing is these horses, you could find a job for them and you could find a person for these horses.
Yep.
Not every horse was for every person, but every person could probably find a horse that suited them here at one time or another.
Would I be safe in saying that way over 90% of the Paint Me Hobbies wound up carrying non-pros?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't know of probably any that wouldn't have carried.
They weren't horses that were just open horses. I mean, there's frankly some reiners out there. If they'd have to be open horses or die in a can because they were just so powerful and so dynamic that they couldn't dial it back.
Right. I think that the best thing with the Paint Me Hobbies, and I think they could ride. If you got them broke and trained, if Peg and I broke them and trained them, we could take them to our level and we could show them for our clients. We could bring those horses out of the show pen and those horses would come back down to the level of that rider. Not every horse will do that.
Right.
And we were lucky enough to be able to have these horses that would adjust for the rider. I mean, it was like you crawl in your car and you push the button, the seat adjusts so you can drive it, and they would adjust themselves for each person that rode them. And that's why I think they had the longevity they had. They had the owners would never sell them. We couldn't get anybody to sell them. We could have made them tons of money on these horses, but they would never sell them.
And a lot of them remained in your program through their whole career.
Absolutely.
Maybe they went home, but they'd come back for tune-ups and they'd haul to the shows with you and so on.
Most of these horses ended their careers here as far as, they got retired here and a lot of them even stayed here in the later years, just retired here. They'd come and some of them got put in the lesson program and some of them got leased back to little kids or novice people to take them to the shows that maybe lower level shows. But the soundness record on those horses was incredible to
Well,
me.
and
versus today.
speaking briefly about your lesson program, one of your regular go-to lesson horses was Paint Me Hobby himself.
Absolutely. When we first started breeding him, of course, we had these colts we wanted to sell. We wanted to promote them, and Peg and I sure didn't have the money to promote all these horses, and wasn't about to. So we would sell these horses, and they said, "Well, we want to take lessons. We want a horse to ride." Well, we'll give you Paint Me Hobby to ride. You'll take lessons on him till your horse grows up. We get him broke, and then we'll go to your horse. And there were a lot of people, and you could talk to a lot of people that were here even in the earlier years that took their lessons on Paint Me
And
Hobby.
virtually some of them had their first rides
Yes.
on Paint Me Hobby.
Yeah. I mean, this is how good a mind they were. But that's why I think the mind is probably the first thing I would look at on a versatile horse. And then obviously everything else, the conformation, and a way of going. I mean, they obviously, but conformation and way of going really is going to tell you
Right.
whether they're going to stay
The sort of
sound. or
form
not.
to function.
Exactly. I mean,
And mixed in there, in a lot of your mares, on that side too, was some speed.
oh yeah, yeah.
A lot of your mares had some speed, and you started later in his career doing something that was intriguing to me, and that is you injected a lot of thoroughbred blood into the program.
We did. The other thing that you have to remember is we also line bred this horse. So we had to get some outcross somewhere, and we had to go sort of a different
so
direction
you went
sometimes.
right back to the thoroughbred for that
For the
outcross a lot of
outcross.
times.
We didn't take the racehorse away. We just put a total outcross of pedigree in there and still had good racehorse.
Almost every thoroughbred mare you had here had a track record.
Absolutely. We wouldn't buy them or use them unless they had a record. We had a lady at the track that would sort of find them for us, and she had a great eye for a horse, and she would call me every now and then. And if they had excessive white, that made a plus. Then we would run and look at them for
Yep.
sure. But we did put thoroughbred. I'm not afraid of thoroughbred. I think thoroughbred actually enhances when you have to infuse your program. I think you really need to go to a straight
You can
thoroughbred.
always go back to the thoroughbred. right?
Exactly. I think you have to.
But you always went to a certain type of thoroughbred because a lot of people, when they think thoroughbred, they think these horses that look like greyhounds.
Right.
And, their belly's up against their backbone and they look like they could run all day and maybe not do much else, and they're 16-3. And you went for horses that were bigger boned, bigger footed, more substantial.
That's correct.
I can remember looking at a mare down here, and you said, "This mare's won 150,000." And I looked at her, and here's this little mare, about 14-3. She's got a hip about this long. And I said, "Well, was it in reining or cow horse?" And you said, "No, on the track." And she was one of your thoroughbred mares.
Yeah. The good mare that they just retired, the Hobby's Back in Black, was out of a mare by the name of Cloudette. And she had, I don't know totally what she won, but I bought her as a 2-year-old. She broke down, fractured her knee, and that mare was probably about maybe 15 hands. And today, if that mare was here today, she could hold her own in a performance mare halter class. She had the confirmation.
If you said, "We're going to give her quarter horse
Yes,
papers for
exactly.
the day,"
If you-
they'd give her a pretty serious look.
Yes, she was a good enough mare conformationally, and that's where that mare came out of. And most of my good ones that ended up being, getting good show records and going on and being just a little notch above some of the others, they were mostly out of the good thoroughbred mares that I go and have a record and had a lot of confirmation. Those mares had a lot of confirmation.
So at some point you realized that you had Paint Me Hobby, you kept a bunch of his mares or his fillies that grew up to be your brood mares, except you didn't want to breed back to him.
Right.
So you made a move that caught some different blood. Tell us about that.
Well, it's funny how things evolve in this industry, and we, of course, started out in the show horse business, and these were Paint Me Hobbies. We were showing as show horses. I think they could have been a lot of things at the beginning, but we had to. That's the way our business went. Then the performance horse industry, the higher end performance, talking about the Rainans, the cow horse, and those events were becoming a lot more popular, and the people here were keeping an eye on some of that stuff, but nothing here. We didn't have anything high end, and they probably weren't going to really go show it wholeheartedly, even though reining was always my favorite class of all time, but my business never really took me that way. But I still was interested in all-around horses, and I think we needed to put a little bit more performance blood in the Paint Me hobbies, especially out of these thoroughbred mares, and we were breeding just paint mares, show
A
paint
little
mares.
bit more of that athleticism
Exactly.
and quickness and
Yeah, and a little more of the cow horse, the little bit of more, the refined performance horse look, have a little bit more moves to them.
And
So we,
and that was around the time Smart Chickalina was revolutionizing, I think I can safely say, the reining world.
Yeah, he was.
Because nobody really seen a horse quite like him when he crossed over, having been a successful cutter.
yes,
And which I'm sure also intrigued you because there's your versatility.
absolutely.
So you went looking for a son of Smart Chickalina?
I was looking for a performance son. It wasn't necessarily, it was to be a son of Smart Chickalina. We were looking for like a reining horse bred or a cow horse bred stallion, and I had some investors that wanted to get into it. And at that time, you weren't buying horses for like that for $1,500. You weren't going to find them. And I really wanted a horse with some excessive light or even a paint, because they were crossing some of these horses. So my good friend Pete Boland, again, he calls me. He's at the Quarter Horse World, and he's at the Babcock Ranch, and he said, there's a Novara colt down here that you really need to look at if you want to get another young stud. And it was a yearling. And at that time,
He was a Smart Chickalina.
he was by Smart Chickalina and out of a paint mare by the name of Olden's Elizabeth,
And
who
what's
was by
interesting there
Olden's
is, if I remember right, her background was she was half thoroughbred herself.
Right, that's correct.
So
On Bob's
you're
side.
right back to, you
Yeah.
didn't get rid of that cornerstone.
We never
when
lost
you went to the
thoroughbred.
cow horse side.
But we really strengthened the cow horse, and if we went to Smart Chickalina, and I said, well, Pete, I don't know if we can afford Smart Chickalina. At that time, the yearlings were selling for $25,000 and up. And I said, I don't know if I can do that. And he said, no, Terry. He said, I can get you this one worth the money. Just tell me if I should bring him home. And Pete at that time lived up in Gettysburg. And I said, bring him home. If he doesn't suit, I'll pay to ship him back to Texas. So they brought him home, and I got the phone, and I got 2 investors to invest in him. And, then the rest became history. But we got Smart Play here, and then he was a Loudon horse. He was probably one of at that point, he was probably the most talented horse I had ever sat on once we started to ride him. And
He ended up being, you sent him to Ronnie Emmons. to
right, we
ride.
sent him back to California to ride because my investors needed something. I didn't want
Something on the national stage.
He had to be, yes, and he had to breed mares, and we would had to be able to advertise him. I had these guys invest a lot of money. I needed to make them money. And Ronnie had won the all-around trailer at the Paint World 5 years in a row. And I called Ronnie and I said, look, I got a nice horse. And I said, and I know if he's good enough, you'll take him to the NRHA futurity. And if he's not good enough,
He'll do something else.
you'll do something else. You'll rope off of him, or you'll find something for him to do, or maybe even do the cow horse with him. And so anyhow, a lot of the guys around here wanted him, and I said, I got to send him where he's going to do the best for me, because still my clients were in the show horse business. They were still showing horses, so I still had to look at the all-around side of this. So we sent him to Ronnie, and obviously Ronnie does what he does with horses. I mean, he gets them very, very broke. He roped off of him. He worked cattle on this horse. Did end up taking him to the NRHA fraternities. He made the finals in the limited open. And Pete called me. He says, you're in like Flint now, boy. He said, they're going to breed to this horse. And, we bred 57 mares to him the first year when he came back.
And you did something with him that you did with Paint Me Hobby that always intrigued me. You bred both those horses as 2-year-olds, right?
That's correct.
In other words, a lot of people, their horse will be 5 years old before they cover a mare.
Right.
Because they wait for their show career to be kind of leveling out. But you didn't want to wait to find out what they were going to do for you, which meant that you, while the horse was still hot, while people were still thinking about him as a show horse, you actually had some babies you could sell.
That's correct. In other words, we took all our studs and we broke them as 2-year-olds. And at that time, Paint Me Hobby, and there was no artificial insemination, weren't allowed. So he had to live cover every mare. And as soon as he would live cover a mare, we would sack him up and we would ride him. And these horses were very disciplined in the breeding shed. And I think when you hold a horse back from breeding, like as a 2 or 3-year-old, I think you frustrate the horse. I mean, I think you really do.
I remember you'd breed a mare, saddle them up, and take them
We'd
right
just
out
go ride 'em.
in the indoor with all those up mares And
We breed one of the show mares, put them in the trailer together and haul the horse show, and and they'd be stabled down the. And with these horses, never ever they knew their job and they knew when to do it. And Smart Play was very very good horse. That was the most fun horse I ever showed. But
and you ended up getting him back and showing him in a variety of different
correct,
events.
yeah, we made him a very versatile horse, and
And you showed him in the reining, you showed him in Western riding, I think. Didn't
Western riding made the honor roll, Western riding trail, and we
You-
showed him a little cattle horse up, when they had a couple of cow
you?
horses passing around there.
Didn't you show him under English tack a few times?
We showed him one time as a 2-year-old before he went to Ronnie, and he had like 500 under saddle points maybe.
Yeah.
So, but
And
I didn't want to embarrass him after he had made the NRHA final.
He didn't have a hot bone in his body.
No, he was just. I love that horse. I mean, he was probably one of my best show horses. I mean, Pay Me Hobby was the king, but Smart Play and I just had some sort of rapport. I just loved that horse.
And the cross worked because the docks were so bold, and the Smart Plays were sort of sensitive and a little timid, and the dock Paint Me Hobby
Yes.
cross kind of gave them a little more guts.
Exactly, and I think it was a good cross. I think we had some great horses on that cross. I mean, the Playing for Broke horse that my sister rode, but
And he was, for a time, wasn't he the all-time leading earner
he was
of paint points?
he was named the richest horse in APHA. He had earned more money in the Breeders' Trust
In
than
the incentive.
any other horse, and he was just a great horse.
And I showed at shows where he was, and every time he turned around, he was in the ring in something different.
Yeah, he would-
and he was winning a prize.
Yep, he jumped. I know he jumped. Hunter under saddle. We showed him some Western pleasure, not too much, but he did do
Good trail horse.
awesome trail horse. I said he was one of the best trail horses ever showed. Western riding, which he led the honor roll in Western riding. Hunter hack, over fences, Hunter over fences, and then went on for the amateur and did all the X, the horsemanships and the X, and the whole thing. So
And had a smile on his face the
every
whole
time. I never had a horse that would wait on me like a horse would wait. Okay, what's next? And that was one of the nicest horses I think ever came through our program. That was, if I said this is the ideal all-around horse that anybody can ride, it would have been Playing for
So
Broke.
I know that by this time, we're in the 90s somewhere?
We'd be in the 90s. Yeah,
Later
we're having
90s.
fun. It'd be the late 90s there because we would have showed that horse's mother before that.
And by that
early
time,
90s.
we were really getting into the grip of specialization. And yet horses like this were going in and beating the specialists, which is a hard job to do.
It was, but it was coming. I mean, at the end of the 90s, we were coming into specialization, and I think we all knew it. And I think maybe we wrote them harder to say, please don't do that to us. But it was headed there. It was headed there. The money was going to be out there, and it was headed there. Yes.
Well, let's just talk a little bit, sort of specifics as to events, and I made a little list here. You obviously showed both Paint Me Hobby and Smart Play babies in halter classes and confirmation classes and did well.
Mm-hmm.
You showed them in Western Pleasure. You showed them in Hunter Under Saddle.
Yes.
You had several of them that jumped and did like Working Hunter.
Yes. Working Hunter hack. Yes.
You ended up, though you, like myself, were resolute non-ropers, but a lot of the horses, both Paint Me Hobby and Smart Plays, went to the rodeo arena
absolutely,
for
yeah.
youth rodeo and open
Yeah,
riders,
yeah.
and were everything from tie-down horses to heel horses. And I can remember one little mare that we actually traded, that I bred and traded back
Yes,
to you, who did all three. She
Yes.
roped heels, she roped heads, and she tied down.
Yeah.
And she stood all of 14 too.
Right. That's
And
it.
she'd had a steer, and you wouldn't know how she'd ever do it. And she never faltered. And you showed him a lot of barrel horses,
Yeah. The Pegs Barrel program. I mean.
and that crossed over into the rodeo
The
side.
rodeo deal, and I'll just cut in now, and somebody asked me, actually just asked me on the phone the other day, what made you brand horses? And the rodeo is what made us brand them, is because they never call out the horse's name at a rodeo. and we wanted to know people know where they came from. I just wanted to interject that because a lot of people have asked about the branding, where did it come from, and why did I do it, so that they were tagged as they came from.
People knew it was an evergreen horse when they walked in the pen.
I mean, Herm Gailey, wins the barrels, well, or the roping, but they never say what Herm Gailey's horse's name was.
Which is really what it's all about.
Yeah, to me, it's all about that. It was about that. So, yes.
And you even had, I think you had an honor roll pleasure driving horse.
Yes.
Until you decided never to drive one again.
But I went out of my wreck. I said, okay, this is over.
You had a major wreck.
Yeah.
And that was the last time I don't even think you repaired
I didn't.
The cart. You just pushed it down there in the woods and forgot about it.
And I come down and loaded the other 3 up and said they're for sale, and I'm never doing it again. But yeah, but we did have that. We had a pretty good pleasure driving thing going there for a while. We led the nation in that, and
you had a Congress winner in pole bending, right?
Yeah, we had several Congress winners in pole bending because when Doc was 17 years old, AQHA changed the rule,
right?
And he got his quarter horse papers.
He did. Yep.
And then we could go back and get quarter horse papers on all those horses that had quarter horse
and there was a ton of them.
There was a lot of them, and a lot of very talented horses that were just sitting.
So they could go to the quarter horse shows,
Yep.
and they all of a sudden were eligible for the quarter horse Congress and
Yep.
the quarter horse world. And
That's correct.
You had multiple Congress winners and some world show qualifiers and placements.
Colleen Mare, I guess, won the world. We had some world winners,
and that was
a
poles or barrels.
She would have won in poles,
Yeah.
but and that's a huge deal for a horse that for 17 years couldn't produce a quarter horse.
But I know that the horse that Colleen Hershey had, I got to know her as a reiner.
Yeah, we started her out in
She started
out reining
in the local reining association where I was showing with my daughter. And here's this big, stylish black mare that was half thoroughbred.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
she'd go in there and run a pretty darn cute reining pattern.
The mare was so talented, But we take these horses, and first the earlier ones we just take to the horse shows and run through the program a little bit, and not show them real serious, but get some handle on them and get them listening. And then when the lower level reining, so there was several of those deals. Of course, we knew who they were, the SVRAs, and so I would put those barrel horses that were in Peg's barrel program.
That was their transition.
And that was their beginning. So that we
got broke and they learned to handle themselves.
And they learned how to go in the pen by themselves, but still have to listen. Because when you barrel race them, it's like any racehorse. They know what their job is when they get to the gate. And, it's hard sometimes to get them to listen. They're focusing on their job, So.
Let's talk about a horse and reverse that.
Okay.
It was one of my personal favorites. I think, is his registered name Fun Time Hobby? Is that the right name? He goes by Binky.
Yep, Fun Time Hobby.
But this horse went and he became a 1D barrel horse, right?
Yep.
So he was at the top of the
top of his game.
Yeah, and they decided they wanted to do the reining. So he flipped that. Mm-hmm. Instead of going from the reining pen and then notching it up and running barrels, he went from coming in and running 9-0 to having to come in, run down there, stop, and roll back and turn around and lope circles.
Yep.
And he was a pretty damn nice reiner.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
And he's a terrific head horse.
Yes, he's heading now.
And he's 25 years old.
Yep. Yep. And
so that's to me encapsulates your program. They could go either direction. It wasn't like you had to graduate them to the barrel horse and world and there was no looking back. You could reverse that and take them down from the barrel racing to the judge performance events, and they'd say, "Whatever, boss."
Yep.
And then when they kind of got out of that, they showed him in ranch horse.
Yep.
He was a very
competitive in the
ranch horse. Might have been, in some ways, the best thing he did because he fitted so well.
Right.
He was a cowboy's horse.
Well, and it was a great way for him to come down off as he was getting older. And
except then they started
roping
roping
him. Yeah, they started now they're roping steers and
you don't need a trailer full of horses or a barn full of horses when you have horses like that.
That's correct. That's correct. And then the other side to it is, and you say this, and now he's 20. So these horses have so much longevity, and that's what was great about them. Because everybody, and I don't care who you are today, you buy a horse, you're probably going to outlive your horse, But these guys, they had them for a long time, and they enjoyed them for a long time. It wasn't
they enjoyed them. They didn't have to be constant maintenance. Exactly. They didn't have to be here all the time.
That's right.
And they didn't need a professional to show them. They just went down the road with their owners and did stuff.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah, they
User friendly.
They were very user friendly. Yes, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about where we are now in the horse business. The biggest change since you and I were walking through the pen 20 times a day on the same horse, and usually getting a little piece of everything from barrel racing to the reining on the
Right.
same horse,
Right.
to coming back and pleasuring them, to if they had a snake roping class, we've
That-
been roping snakes.
Now, you could have had that when I left. That one for you. I don't want to got a coffee, but I don't.
Yeah, snakes and monkeys.
Yeah, that's okay.
So, what we seem to be seeing now are horses that would out and out just slaughter our horses in their individual event, but they are sort of they're like one trick ponies. They go in and they're fabulous reiners, but maybe they wouldn't fit even to take a cow down the fence. They're not going to go in and show in 6 different events. And the same thing is true absolutely with pleasure horses. So, I mean, I don't want to get started on that because I'll get hate mail from people
Yeah,
who like the way the pleasure horse world has gone. So, where do you see us now, and what do you see as the future of the versatile horse now?
Well, I think it was inevitable that it was going to get specialized. When you put the money in, when we were going through the 90s, going up into the 2000s, I mean, it was coming at us, and it was coming at us pretty hard. And the specialization was going to happen. We put money, a lot of money in young horse events. And it's just human nature. You're going to follow the money.
And we had shows that were single event shows all over the place.
Right, exactly.
NRHA shows and cow horse shows and
all these. I mean, even the barrel race, they have the NBHA. You know, everything got specialized in the pleasure horses NSBA, the National Snaffle Bit Association now, which basically pays them money to show their horses. You know, which people never got before. And I think it was the biggest problem is the money draws the people, but now we have a group of people that are buying horses that probably could win money if they had a good enough rider, but most of them are overmounted. I think
when you're talking about the non-pros.
Yeah, when I'm talking about the non-pros, obviously not the opens, but so anyhow, that's sort of where we're at with this thing now. I think there are a lot of really, really nice horses. I think the breeding programs have put out horses for one event.
Incredibly trainable horses.
Beautiful horses, and I mean probably the best horses at a horse show or at an event that you can find. I mean, the percentage of good ones is way greater than it used to be. You know, you don't have to hunt for a good one, that's for sure. But where it's going to go with the versatile horse, I'm hoping what happens is I'm hoping it levels out a little bit, and I think the stock horse of Texas sort of set it up to try to save the versatile horse when they started stock horse of Texas, BF Yates,
and we got the ranch horse,
and basically then the ranch horse took over. I mean,
ranch versatility,
exactly, and
we
it went into the ranch horse, the stock horse of Texas, and the AQHA has now like you were saying, the ranch horse versatility. And I think it may come back around for that. I think it's gaining a lot of popularity. I think the big money events will stay there, and I think the specialty will stay there. I worry more about the longevity of those specialty horses than I worry about.
And that's the other thing when we were talking about the components of a versatile horse. Where do you see the soundness going with our horses today? Because I see some incredibly talented horses who can do freakishly athletic things, but do they have the foot? Do they have the bone? Do they have the staying power to have a long career doing multiple things?
What you have to remember is we were when we ran the all-around programs, I think we were very concerned about the form to function, and is our horse conformationally correct enough to stay sound to do all these events. But I think doing all the events, in saying that, I think by doing all the events, we kept our horses sounder because we kept them saner. And we weren't drilling them on one thing. Obviously, we didn't have the horse that we showed in reining that's going to go to the $1 million reining deal, the
run for a million.
The run for $1 million. Obviously, we didn't have the horse that was going to do that. But what we did have is a horse that we could show in a lot of events. Now, you got to make up your mind. Do you want to run for a lot of money, and be a little fish in a big pond, or do you want to be a big fish in a little pond, do the versatility deal, and go have fun with your horse? It's all in what you want to do. But you are going to sacrifice soundness and saneness when you go to a specialty, because it is a drill. It's a drilling training program. You must be so precise. You must be so on at the highest level that we tend to make horses dispensable when we do
We
that.
almost go, specialization by its nature leads to extremes.
Exactly it does. And and the next million, the run for the million, they're going to try to get more and more out of that next generation of horses.
And then you see the cutters that they can operate like a border collie, but they're only about as big as a border collie.
Well, and that's the problem. And then you got to go back to the breeding programs of, okay, now we're only breeding the ones that are winning. We're breeding only to the winners. The winners are breeding to the winners.
And the
So you're-
tallest horse in the pen is 14-1.
Exactly. And when you start to shorten your gene pool or close in on your gene pool, then you're going to run into big problem, because not only does inbreeding or line breeding enhance the good of every horse, it also enhances the bad. And every time you do that, you're enhancing the good, but you're also enhancing the bad. So it has no choice. It'll never happen. I don't think they could take the time, because I think you would have to hit stop, pause. And there needs, as we put 3 bars into the AQHA in the early years, those guys had the foresight to see what line breeding was going to do, and they needed to put an outcross in. Right now, today, we need to bring an outcross into these higher-bred performance horses, but I don't know how that's going to be done. And I'd honestly, that would be the answer.
Because that outcross, the offspring of the outcross may not beat the specialty bred horses.
Exactly.
And it's getting to be, unfortunately, a little bit of win at any cost.
Right. No, it would be time. In time, it would beat those
Yes.
horses, but
Not the first generation,
Yeah.
and maybe not the second.
And we're living in an age, and we grew up in a term, you know it and I know, of fast moving. And the more we went to
Instant
fast,
gratification.
exactly. And that's what's happened. We moved into this specialty thing way too fast, in my opinion, to keep the horse, the integrity of the horse in mind. I think we are. It's like anything happens in this country. The horse business is nothing different. The money is going to come before anything else. When we can make money, some of these guys are making big business on this specialty deal, and I guess more power to them. I just would like to see them take a little more concern about the horses that they're putting out there. That's the only thing I would say. I don't think you're going to change it. I don't think, but I do think you can still, if you want to have fun with a versatile horse, I think you could. There are the ranch programs. I think do help bring that back to some degree.
And if we could revitalize the open shows, which were mainly do-it-yourselfers,
That's exactly.
amateurs go into the shows, and they used to be 500 entries a day. They've kind of dried up, and it's a shame, because that's where you could go and pay a nominal entry fee, and you didn't have to have a stall, and you didn't have to travel a long distance, and you could show your horse 6 or 7 or 8 times in a day and feel like you really had a day instead of 2.5 minutes in
Right.
the pen.
And the other thing to that is, it used to be where, when the breed shows started to have shows, it was a place for the entry-level people to start, I think we really need to be looking at entry-level programs, because you're never going to keep this high end going if we don't have, the people that support all these programs and all the associations are the people at the bottom, not the people at the
Right.
top.
And the cost of playing the game has changed.
The cost is
And
phenomenal.
that's maybe a good thing to turn to. First of all, on the non-pros that you work with and have worked with over the last few years, there's a sort of a demographic shift, isn't there? In other words, the population is a different population than when you started. It's older. It's maybe not as skilled. Not as ready to take chances and learn to ride as wanting to be safe.
Well, yeah, I think.
And it's mainly female,
Yeah,
which is
it
remarkable.
Mainly female, especially in the horse side, the ranch side. I mean, the rodeo side obviously has more men in it. But anyhow, yeah, I think when we were hauling the amateurs, and we were hot and heavy hauling, I think they committed to it, and they committed. They wanted to learn. They want it to be better. Today, I think the money thing where, I don't know, it looks to me like people are just spend a lot of money and think they can skip the step of learning. I bought this pro course, look how fabulous he is, I'm going to win everything. Well, it's like buying your car and getting all the instructions running in Japanese and you can't read Japanese because that horse is foreign to you. I don't think they quite understand.
You're going to get less than 50% out of a horse that could go win at 100%.
I always love the saying that people say, your horses are all just push button. Well, thank you for that, because I would like to know where all the buttons are that we get to push. But I said they may look that way, but those people had to learn to ride them that way. You can buy the best broke horse in the world. If you don't know how to ride it, you can make it look like it's the worst broke horse in the world.
There are cars out there I wouldn't want to attempt to drive.
That's right. It's exactly right.
And they're push button.
Yeah. And I'm just, it worries me a little bit that we're trying to again make this go in a fast pace where we get to spend a lot of money and just get to and think that you don't have to put the work in. Nothing changes. The horses didn't change with society. It still takes a year to get one here. It takes X amount of time to break one. It takes X amount of time for an amateur to learn how to ride it. None of that's going to change. It's never going to change.
I guess the final thing I wanted to touch on is the current state of the horse market, which is right now in an unprecedentedly high level, and a lot of folks who have absolutely needed an infusion of cash to keep their business going are doing very well. But is there a downside? Talk a little bit about, let's look back 10 years, 2014. I want a really nice trail riding horse that's broke, and I mean, he will go out and go cross country with some style, and I could take him to a horse show on the weekend. And I'm saying I could spend $5,000. 10 years ago, would you have got a horse like that bought for $5,000?
Yeah, easily you could have bought a horse for $5,000 then. Today, it probably is going to cost you about $20,000 or $25,000. Well, the reason that is because, in the about 2008 to 2000,
we had the economic downturn.
We had the economic downturn, and the small breeders gone. They're gone, especially here on the East Coast. There's no small breeders anymore. And that trail riding horse came out of those breeding programs, okay? Now there are no breeding programs like that. So you now have to go to where they're breeding the high end and the specialty horses. And nobody's breeding specialty trail horses.
And if you want a horse to go show, even at a relatively modest level, you're not going to buy that horse for $7,500 or $10,000 like you would have done 10 years ago.
No.
You won't get a prospect for that.
No, the prospects right now are going to cost you between $20,000 and $25,000. That's a prospect. That's not a horse we even know if he's going to make it, do what you want it to do.
Maybe,
you're going to
never had a saddle on his back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, just 5 years ago they were probably $10,000 to $12,000. Now they're up to I would say it's going to be $20,000 to $25,000 easy. And that that's a horse that that, well, if this thing gets broke, it probably would be okay.
Work.
Yes, he should work. Yeah, I mean.
So with the strong market, does that, in the end, help the horse industry, the horse business, or is there also a downside risk?
Well, I think it is a downside risk to it. I mean, there's obviously those people here that are making all the money and making a lot of money. And, and I don't begrudge anybody to make money. The problem is we have no levels of horses like we used to have. I mean, we used to have the low level of horses that nobody wanted.
What did you pay for your first horse?
My very first horse, I paid $750.
I paid $90.
Well, that's
so I got you beat.
Yeah.
Now he didn't have.
But that might have been too much. I didn't see him.
He didn't have ears. but for $90, you don't expect ears.
That was sort of like an extra.
He
right?
came from a cold place, and nobody thought to bring him in.
Yeah.
But he listened to me as best he could without ears. But a kid could go and spend $90 out of his piggy bank and get himself a horse like that didn't come from a kill pen. He tried to put me in the kill pen a few times, but you could learn that way and get a horse. I mean, he carried me for years.
Well, I think all that has to do though.
And it was easy to get in. I'm worried about how hard it is for new folks to get in.
I'm not sure we live in a society where people want to get in like that anymore, but
Well, there's that.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think we're all so overprotected anymore
Yeah.
that none of us would do. I mean, I'm not sure you would let your child do
I
it. You
did
know,
not buy
but
my daughter Kim, and she's standing here. She can say I did not buy her an earless horse.
yeah,
and murder in his
exactly.
heart.
Me, I did. I think I did buy my daughter a death wheel, but anyhow, I don't think we're in a society for that. I do think there needs to be.
But a good mid-level horse, not the $90
The
horse.
problem is
maybe
where-
the $3,000 to $5,000 horse, and somebody can have some fun.
So where does that horse come from? That would be the question to me. We would have had those, the breeder down the road, the other small breeders in this state, just in this state.
I
could have sent you there to buy some of those kind,
I
but
bought 90% of my show horses, and they did well, out of people's backyards.
yes, absolutely.
Out of people who bred 2 mares a year, and they had decent mares, and they upgraded them with good stallions, and nobody was beating down their door to buy those babies, but I was right there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, I mean, we would go back and buy a lot of those Paint Me Hobby Colts. People just, they wanted the thrill of having a baby, then didn't know what to do with it after they had it. And we would buy them back and.
And it kept the price point to where people could get into the
Exactly
game
right.
with a nice horse and learn from that horse, be safe on that horse, and get some enjoyment. And then they would stay in the game and spend more money.
And then you
in
could
the
go
horse
to the
business.
higher end breeding farms or the higher caliber horses at that breeding farm.
But there were. It's like they talk about starter houses. Well, where the heck are the starter
Well-
houses? Where are the starter horses?
Well, but they used to come from the small breeders, and until the small breeder can come back, and I don't see that happening in a very near future. But I'm hoping this high end thing levels out a little more. These horses get a little more reasonable. The ones that aren't quite making at the top level get a little more reasonable, and maybe this will level out. But at this point, I think it's very, very tough to say that there's a place you can go buy that $5,000 prospect. I don't know that there is.
I can remember the first NRHA reining I went to. I had 2 mares. My total purchase price for those 2 horses was $2,300. You couldn't do that 10 times over.
No.
Now I homemade, put them together myself. But at that first reining I went to, I won it, and I was 3rd or 4th.
Right.
Now I thought it was going to be easy. It was a long time till I had another good day like that. But those horses got me there. I could afford to get myself there, and I was hooked.
Right.
And that's what this game's about: is getting people hooked.
Yep, you have to get them hooked, but I think we're in trouble that way a little bit until something happens there. But the little breeder needs to come back, and right now it's tough. It's expensive to get back in it, but we'll see where this goes once. I think this
It'll
high-end thing
normalize a bit.
Yeah, I think it will get more normalized, and let's see where it goes there. But I would like to see just exactly what you're saying. There needs to be another level of horse for those people to get
And
into.
we need to have a
And we
whole
had
new
to.
entry level coming on board because.
And we need entry-level programs.
There's a lot of gray heads out there showing horses.
Yeah, exactly. And there needs to be entry-level programs too, and there needs to be a lot more put into that because I think there's going to be a need for that down the road really,
You bet.
really bad. So
It's
yeah.
a niche somebody could fill
Yeah.
and make a good living.
Exactly.
Well, Terry, this has been great. Anything that you would like to say in closing? Anything that you'd like to just pass on? Any words of wisdom?
I don't know. I mean, first of all, I want to thank Herm for having me here. Secondly, as Peg and I close out, it's been basically we've been in it for 50 years, and it's been a great 50 years. I would do it all over again, believe me. But I think my biggest thing is don't ever feel you're too educated in this business. I think we tend to sometimes the winning can outride what we know. You can get a real high opinion of yourself real quick. But I'll just use the famous saying of my wife: just remember, you're only as good as the last time you were out there.
Amen.
But have a great time, folks. I had it, and I'll be around. I'll see y'all. And Herm, thanks a million.
2 final words.
Okay.
50 years ago, You said our mission is to produce great-minded, versatile horses for all levels of riders. 2 words for you. Mission accomplished.
Thank you.